And we are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Podcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the Naked City, the city of, well, I guess about 365,000 stories. We've told a few tonight, and there's more to come. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, the mothership at coalitionradio.us. We'll be peppering you with new links. We've finally gone from not just video, but we translate now into podcasts. We're on iHeartMedia and Spreaker, and hopefully iTunes soon. Which is why we're doing a little bit more structured programming, why we break it into 1-hour segments now, as opposed to the looser format that we had in the past. So, traditionally, we refer to the 8 o'clock hour as sort of the Libertarian hour. I invite people that I find interesting from around the Libertarian planet, if you will. The hope being, and I express this in the run-up with my guest, that particularly in the podcast and indie media world, there is libertarian talent everywhere. We don't, as a party, have the kind of media clout that's going to routinely get us on Bill Maher or any of the talking head shows on the major networks, per se. That's something we need to work on. There isn't a reason why we shouldn't, but we haven't. But what we do have are literally hundreds of independent media types, bigger, smaller, podcasts, streaming TV. We need, as a group, to come together, check the egos at the door, and mobilize so that as we come closer to 2020, the potential absence of a national candidate as a figurehead for the Libertarian Party doesn't damage us. We may not have the budget for the big TV buys, but I believe that we can get into millions of American households by simply having conversations and getting together with different folks at different levels of independent media. So we can, as a group, and we know how much we hate the term collectivize here as libertarians, but as a group, find commonality, a little bit of planning, a little bit of coordination. We can go a hell of a long way. Joining me for the first time is Connor Drigotas. I became familiar with seeing him online and seeing some of the stuff he wrote. Today he published a piece in 71republic.com, and it speaks to an issue that I think is really captured the imagination of libertarians, both to the good and to the bad. And we really need to focus on this, I think, and either come up with a plan or just work it out of our system so that we can get ready for the election. Of course, I'm talking about the well-timed, the exquisitely timed announcement by Congressman Justin Amash that he has left the planet, left the building, left the island. He's gone to his own private Idaho, all right, old guy cultural reference, okay, and he has decided that he is spiritually no longer a member of the Republican Party. What was fascinating to me was, for a lot of libertarians, they were waiting for the second part of the announcement that didn't come, or hasn't come yet. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Great piece in 71 Republic, Connor. And first of all, welcome to the Coalition. Thank you for joining us. Prominently over his shoulder is he identifies with a college that I may have some issues with, but that's another podcast, another time. I'll spare you the normal references that I make to members and alumni of your school. All right.
It's very fair. Very fair.
And you'll refrain from the same.
Exactly. Right? Very fair.
So we've got a peace accord here. To hell with the Dallas Accord. This is the Lafayette Accord. But welcome aboard. And tell us, first of all, a little bit about yourself, your background. You're very, very active in libertarian politics, big L as well as little l. You write. Communications is your thing. And I always ask, give us the backstory, and I always ask everyone, I've done it twice tonight, all right, what that libertarian moment was. What was that moment in your life where you decided, you know what, I'm not going to take the easy way out. I'm not going to find myself in line for political patronage jobs. I'm not going to work for a really well-financed political organization. I'm going to be a libertarian. What was that moment?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, this is... I'm excited to talk about Amash because he's been around. He's someone that we all genuinely care about and we want to see be successful in one way or the other. But for me, I've been doing this for about 10 years now, caring about libertarianism. And I was very lucky, I think, growing up where I knew that at some point when I headed off to college, I was going to be out of the house. And my father said, hey, go and be you. There was a good foundation. But I wasn't really political. when I was a kid. And when I was a freshman in college at that school that will not be named throughout this program, uh, I was listening to the radio. I had talk radio on, Glenn Beck or something at the time, I'm sure. And I heard a voice. It was someone who was just making a lot of sense, talking a lot of good ideas about relating to people, and he didn't identify as a Republican. So as I was listening closer, I heard the name, Gary Johnson. And right, exactly. So I'm sitting there, and I was, of course, a freshman in college. I had no idea about how the world worked. I knew next to nothing. So the first thing that I did is I said, well, I want to learn more. And the only way to do that is not to read, it's not to look it up. I'm going to call Gary Johnson's office, and I'm going to invite this guy to come over to the East Coast, to Eastern Pennsylvania, and we'll host him. We're not going to pay for his flights. We're not going to pay for his hotels. But hey, if you want to fly across the country and come speak to a bunch of college students, would you do that? And for some reason, someone in his office looked down at that phone and said, absolutely, let's set it up. So Gary Johnson came and spoke to a group of about 100 of us at my school, and I got the opportunity to sit down and have dinner with him after. So we took him out, just a thank you for doing such a great job. And that was really the introduction that inspired me to start opening books, start connecting with people, get involved with local libertarian organizations, just generally care a little bit more about the idea of liberty. And that's what it's done for the past 10 years now, is set me on this path to, sure, an uphill battle to make the world a little more free and hopefully make my community a little better as a result of it.
No, that's excellent. Reader's Digest version, I was driving along one night in northern Massachusetts. It was bitter cold, as they say. And if you've ever listened to, I'm driving up to Maine or so, you ever listen to a station called WBZ, and some guy was on the radio, and he was talking about, lives of independence and eliminating government and eliminating the nanny state and letting businesses prosper. And he talked about how he was an entrepreneur, and he bootstrapped his own construction company that was still employed over 1,000 people. Like, who the hell is this guy? And how is he allowed on the airwaves in Boston? And so I called in, and he goes, well, why don't you talk to Governor Johnson yourself? And here I am. So
he gets the hook in on a lot of people because right. He's a genuinely relatable human being, and regardless of whether or not you like the nuance of what he represents when you get into the details, it's an incredible introduction for so many people. I guess similar to Justin Amash in a lot of ways, to the point of what we're talking about tonight.
Right. No, Gary and Justin represent, if you step away from the political labels, which we're going to do for a few minutes here, represent excellence on so many levels. I mean, Gary, the self-made man, the guy who climbed every major peak on the planet, the guy who runs triathlons, it's compelling stuff. And if when you, I know jingoist, but when you think of, to me, American excellence is someone who represents that Renaissance man while simultaneously celebrating the spirit of the individual. And that's, to me, is American excellence, not this jingoistic USA chanting crap. That's fun at times, but really someone who is that iconic, lonely person who just somehow manages to accomplish great things, sometimes through sheer force of will. And Justin Amash, I mean, to his credit, his family's credit, they represent, to a large degree, the American dream come true. Family came to this country from the Middle East. Not a lot of money, not a lot of prospects, and by second generation, you've got a sitting United States congressman who has the balls and the gall to get up in the grill of a sitting president. And for all the tough speak that so many people do, to Justin Amash's eternal credit, he is willing to, not just talk the talk, but the cliche is walk the walk. He clearly fears no man, and to that, I think we owe him an eternal debt of gratitude. So, here's my personal point of torture with this. I'm a big fan of Kim Ruff. All right, I think the Ruff Phillips campaign. If you looked at their appearance on Judge Knapp a few weeks ago,
yep,
and this is not to take away from Gary, but on a public forum, she, in the matter of one interview show, I think did a better job than Weld in the entire campaign of articulating a clear libertarian philosophy, why we are, what we do, without falling to the cliches of someone who really wasn't birthed in the liberty movement. So we've got this problem here, and we've gone Republican light so many times in a row now, and I was just as responsible. I'll admit, I whipped votes on the floor in Orlando for Bill Weld. Bill Weld was the governor and represented to a lot of New Englanders what a libertarian stood for. And then he went off the ranch, in what we all know as the vows for Hillary night. I'll always point out with great pride that there was only one state that threw him out of the state. That was Rhode Island.
Yep.
We threw him the hell out, much to the delight of certain people still active in the movement. That being said, so it's very, very attractive to me to have someone like Kim. Now, we understand that she doesn't have the national name appeal yet. But harken back to this loose assortment of people, nearly 5 million people managed to vote Libertarian in the last election. How do we as an organization, with just just a little over a year left, how do we harness that power? Or do we look to someone like a Justin Amash? So what's your thoughts? And tell me about the article. What stimulated, what spurred you to write this?
Well, honestly, I think that a lot of people, when they heard that Justin Amash was leaving the GOP, their natural question, because he had teased the 2020 presidential run under the Libertarian ticket, was to say, all right, as you said, let's wait for that other shoe to drop. It's just a matter of time. But I think that we were asking that question a little prematurely. What we should have been asking is, how do we want to best advance the cause of liberty? Because at the core of it, I think that's what we really care about, is how are we reining in this out of control government spending? How are we advancing personal liberties? And the question that needs to be asked is, if that is in fact the goal that we want to accomplish, is Justin Amash best suited to do that as a member of the Libertarian Party, or now as an independent? And the argument that I'm making is, as a libertarian, as a big L and a small L libertarian, I do believe that he's better situated at this point in time to do so as an independent for a variety of reasons, which I could get into those just in kind of high level, because this is exactly what the article was about, and then we can get into some of the details. Right. But first, everything about his July 4th declaration was an evisceration of parties themselves. Right. And I think if he were to then go ahead and drop that other shoe and say, I'm going to be a libertarian guy, everyone's going to be like, that's an incredibly hypocritical move. You just said that parties are bad, and now you're just picking a party that opened up their arms and said, you can be you here, which is fine, but that wasn't the point that he was making. Right. So the second point is, I personally believe that the Libertarian Party is not prepared to support him. I wrote another article about this, which we could talk about, called Can Americans Elect a Libertarian? That dealt with a case study of Tim Silfies in PA 7. And then I just genuinely believe that we're not at that point yet, but I'm optimistic that we can be. And the third bit is, what an incredible opportunity as an independent to open doors to friendship, lead with an olive branch, and build alliances that, as a libertarian carrying a different letter after his name, it could shut a lot of those doors. If the point is to advance liberty, let's give Justin Amash all the credit that he needs and all the tools he needs to do that successfully as a member of Congress, hopefully for years to come.
Right. So the central question, of course, is what's next? I wholeheartedly agree with you that the style and the manner she did it with was so elegant, so provocative, that you had this mental image of, that bloated baby Trump that they fly around, the commies fly around sometimes, was stomping and saying, I got my tanks, I got my parade, and they won't let me have fun. They won't let me go to the parade. They won't let me buy the cotton candy and the balloon I want. That's the first image that came to my mind, because I loathe Donald Trump with every ounce I've got. I've got a lot of them. So I just, the timing was spectacular, because if for no other reason than the news cycle was shut down. You're a communications guy. You teach communications, by the way. So, he owned the news cycle really for a good part of this weekend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was a great thing. I mean, I wanted to be releasing a press release on the 4th, right? I mean, that's the perfect time to do it if you have the right message. And he really hit the nail on the head. If it was him or his communications director, whoever was in charge of that, they absolutely, I woke up at 6 a.m. to a news alert. And I did the same thing I did when I got the news alert that said Donald Trump was elected president. I did a hard double take to make sure that I was understanding what I was reading correctly. And it really swept the nation exactly the way that I believe that they planned it to.
Right. So the question then now, the next step, and so you've got two worlds operating here. You've got what our heart desires, and then you've got two different stages of practical. The first stage of practical, as Howard Schultz has found out, that running for the presidency as an independent without any party structure whatsoever is exceedingly difficult. If in fact Congressman Amash's goal is to simply make a statement and capture potentially one or two states, which could throw the election into chaos, as we also wished for just a mere 3 years ago, it's got the real potential to do that. How well he actually does in Michigan will be a real litmus test on, I think, the Michigan Republican voters. Because ultimately, did they really mean it by electing this liberty icon for the last, 4 terms? Or were they just kind of fooling? And the minute they got a chance to meet their new boss, same as the old boss, it was just happened to be their boss, Daddy Trump, that all of a sudden that's thrown out the window. So on a most superficial level, there's the opportunity for this incredible value judgment to be made on the Republican Party. I think I know where the Republican Party comes in, and I think they fail that test miserably. So you've got the practical issues surrounding a national candidacy, which is ballot access. And does he have enough time, and can he marshal the forces and the money to get on all 50 states in what will probably be an even more hostile ballot environment than what happened in 2016. 2016, Chris Thrasher was the head of the ballot access group for Johnson Weld, and he's been a guest on the show. He's a personal friend of mine, and he did an amazing job. Certain states have woken up after that amazing job, and particularly Ohio comes to mind, and are making it more difficult to repeat that amazing job. You know, he got all 50 states. That hadn't been done. I don't know if it's possible to do it again in the absence of a party thing. And then the third thing, and I just want to throw this on, actually, I'm going to turn the table over to you because I want to hear your reaction. The third issue to me is, as a party, a political party's principal goal is to elect people. If we don't at some point build up that bench and build a truly libertarian, and I hate the word that you use because I'm not making that, you're a libertarian more than I judgment, but that if we don't put native libertarians, for lack of a better word, into these high campaign positions, and we keep kind of caving, I use that term loosely, to the latest Republican, do we have that chance to grow? And not just from a candidate level, but from the political structure necessary to compete at a national level. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you just tell me what you think, because you clearly put a lot of thought.
I think that you actually hit the nail on the head in a lot of ways, and I want to point to one big strategic misstep that Amash made in this whole thing. And though he probably wanted to wait until July 4th, and he did knock it out of the park in that moment, he did wait until he was 16 points behind in the latest poll. Right now, he's trailing his primary opponent by 16 points, which is not a great look. So from a communications perspective, from a public optics perspective, it does look like he's taking an easy way out to say, well, listen, if I'm going to get beat in the primary, well, I'm just not even going to acknowledge your primary is valid, and we'll put it to the voters. That could really play well for him, or it could blow up in his face. Yes, if he were to go and take this presidential run and take it seriously and jump after it, that could be another out for him where he's able to scale up. But I think that there's an interesting conversation to be had about whether or not Justin Amash is already looking toward 2024 for a presidential nomination and is genuinely seeking to turn the tide and turn the narrative in 2020 with his congressional reelection bid to say, can I actually overcome voters' problems with a independent tag, a libertarian tag, or just simply by stepping away from the Republican tag in a very important election, almost as a way to test out those waters for his political aspirations moving forward. So again, that's a little bit of give and take there. I have nothing to base it on other than what I would do if I was his campaign manager and I was trying to play three-dimensional chess. But I did think that the timing was interesting. And I could see a strategy meeting where they said, hey, we are 16 points behind. It's not looking good. There is a very good chance we lose our jobs here. What do we do to turn the tables and look toward bigger and better things?
Should he have done it in the immediate aftermath of his call for, again, loosely air quotes here, call for impeachment?
In my opinion, he would have been doing it from a position of strength at that point. He would have been able to say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. This party is leaving me behind. And I think at that point, he would have had a better opportunity to drag in a ton of Democratic support and say, hey, just so you know, my district is, of course, not going to go to a Democrat, regardless of whether or not that's true. But you better support me as an independent with all of your PAC money, with all of your grassroots support, with your door knockers, because I'm going to support LGBTQ rights, because I'm going to be the most, progressive person on these few issues. And again, that aspect of leading with an olive branch is what I'd like to see him do as a member of Congress now under an independent tag. Take the time, build those relationships, build alliances in a way that perhaps you just couldn't before with that R after your name, and maybe use it as a way to change this narrative in a highly partisan and very angry part of American history that I'm sure we'll all look back on and kind of laugh about why we let this get to this point.
As Springsteen would say, someday we'll look back on this and it will seem funny.
Exactly. I'm optimistic for that. I'm hopeful.
Well, it's interesting because to a certain degree, and I hate to even bring up this name, Bernie Sanders did a little bit of that when he was in a truly senatorial operating mode, not as a presidential candidate, but as a senator in senatorial mode. There was a lot of he is not. If you look past to his voting record, he is this not absolute liberal commie that we would always portray him as when it comes to his voting record. Rhetorically, we as political junkies and people in the bubble, can look past that. We're not as immersed and as steeped and as addicted to identity politics as the nattering nabobs out there are. So Bernie had some very controversial stands as a quote-unquote socialist. And so I think the model that you say is accurate. It all comes down to, I guess, twofold. There's speculation, and I haven't had a chance to check the senatorial cycle yet, but there's speculation that he may run for senator or run for his seat as congressman as an independent. Again, if you go after the senatorial seat, then you're in my mind, you're positioning yourself as in attack mode. You're going after something aggressive, and you tend to control the narrative. If you run as a independent in what ultimately will be a three-way race, I just don't know how that goes, and I don't think anyone does.
Right. Also, if he were to do that, I'd point to the fact that he spent $770,000 on his reelection bid in the last cycle, and if he were to take a Senate run, he's going to be looking at probably 1.2, 1.3, and without the typical GOP backing, I'm sure that has to be part of the calculation. Is he going to be able to raise that kind of money to do this in a way that's going to make sense for him and not leave him at the end of the day standing there without a job?
Right. And, then you get into the bogeyman. And there's always kind of a special moment as a libertarian when Republicans or Democrats who decide to play the independent card all of a sudden realize that ballot access is a real problem. Don't think for a moment if he tries to get onto the ballot at either position as an independent that the Trumpers, isn't what's his name? What's her name? The sister of the bridezilla of Mitt. She's Michigan-based, isn't she? I don't think for a moment that the Republicans are going to be, with a microscope looking at every single signature. This could make hanging chads in Florida look like an afterthought.
Well, we're seeing that in Pennsylvania right now. Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania just vetoed a bill that was passed with bipartisan support that would have eliminated straight ticket voting here. And we're seeing active lawsuits from a libertarian perspective against libertarians over one or two signatures. With a campaign I volunteered with last year, I received a phone call from the GOP as someone who helped with the campaign, asking if I signed up to sign for a candidate. And then they gave me the wrong name to ask if I had signed for them before, just to try to, all of these bait and switch techniques are happening. And I think that we need to be aware of that. And I'm hoping that someone on Amash's team is there in his ear saying, here's a 360-degree view of what this world looks like right now for an independent, a libertarian. Again, our core question here as libertarians has to be, how do we want to preserve and grow liberty? Right. And if that is truly his mission, he's got some serious calculus to do to find out what his next step is.
Yeah, and it's not going to be apparent until it's too late. He's got an incredibly complex district. This is not. Yep. This is not some monogamous love affair with the Republican Party, or not. I mean, and he's got a complicated story to explain. The jury is out on Trump's numbers themselves, but there's no doubt at this point that the Republican Party that's left, emphasis that's been left behind still standing, adores him, possibly out of fear, because there's clearly no path forward for guys like Flake, the late senator from Arizona as well, it's those guys, none of them are profiles of courage in my mind, because, if I'm Flake, I guess I would have expected him to have, since this is the 8 o'clock segment, I'll be blunt, I would have expected him to have a little more balls. I mean, if you got the money in the federal account, you can't spend it on anything else, and you truly hate what's going on in Washington, then why not go down that road, go down in flames? Just let loose. No polite conversation in the Senate chambers. Just let it fly. And that's the problem. There's been no profiles of courage in the Republican Party, and no one is willing to call out, 45 simply because it's the right thing to do. Right. It's watching the Republican Party, a party that has draped itself. I mean, I'm a little older than you. And as I've confessed on the airwaves many times, the first political job I ever had, I volunteered. Are you ready for this? For the Richard Nixon campaign in 1972. Really? I was 11 years old. Okay, just to put it in perspective. I bet you don't know too many people who either have and will also admit that they work for CREEP, the Committee for the Re-election of the President. So I don't see anybody in the Republican Party. I mean, this is a party that speaks to liberty, but has increased the scope of civil asset forfeiture, has engaged in war on sex work that's similar to the war on drugs, while at the same time not allowing any scale back on the war on drugs outside of rhetoric, has exploded deficits, has engaged in all sorts of foreign adventures. I mean, they are everything they purport to hate, and no one is willing to admit it. And that's the frustration I have. We're bouncing around here with the notion of a Liberty Republican, because I missed the episode where a bunch of Liberty Republicans chained themselves to Pennsylvania Avenue and said, no, we won't allow this to happen. Other than Amash, which brings us full circle.
I mean, he did the right thing. And I think when we're talking about whether or not, and this is really the crux of what the argument that I've seen over the course of today, I got a lot of mail, a lot of comments, sure. Nick Sarwark was chirping at me about, the actual amount of money that he believes the Libertarian Party could raise to support a candidate like Amash. So the debate is, hey, we're here. And I think anybody who wants to see the Libertarian Party succeed, and if the question is going to be, how do we help the Libertarian Party succeed? The answer is just very black and white. Absolutely the right thing to do is to bring Justin Amash to the Libertarian Party because he's going to do a couple things. One, Amash would bring new people to the Libertarian Party and help the fastest growing party in America continue to grow.
For some people, that's the problem, though. There is that element of I would rather be in charge of the little pond than the big ocean. But keep going. You're on a roll.
Exactly. Well, no, you're absolutely right. And I think the second thing that would be really cool, and why bringing Amash to the Libertarian Party, if the question is how to help the Libertarian Party succeed, is that what if he takes the L tag and he wins? And we have a legitimately elected L person. The track record behind that, whether it's Ebke, Finney, any of the New Hampshire legislators who have done this, where they've taken the L tag and lost, if you can overcome that and get someone who takes the L tag and win, I mean, there's an incredible amount of power there.
Right.
But again, the question that I was asking, the reason why I think this article caught so much flack and so much trash from people is because we're asking different questions. They were asking, how do we help the Libertarian Party succeed? And the question that I wanted to get at is, how do we help liberty succeed as an independent idea? And for me, that means keeping Amash in a position. I don't think any libertarian would look at his voting record and be like, well, given the options, he probably wasn't libertarian. And I mean, this guy has gone out of his way to do the right thing again and again and again. Mm-hmm. So I don't care what the letter is after his name. This is principles above parties, principles above politics. And I think that's what we need to be focusing on. And that's why I'm so adamant that he could do better. He could do more things with an independent tag if he's going to go ahead and get rid of the GOP, as opposed to taking the Libertarian letter after his name.
Because the other concern is Weld burned a lot of bridges.
Yes.
Let's.
Oh yeah, God forbid Amash goes back again. I mean, that would be just another, hatchet to the bottom of our ship.
And the best thing that Weld ever did, quite frankly, was run as a Republican. Because if we had gone onto that convention in Austin next year with the concept of a Weld candidacy for the president, I believe it would have destroyed the party. I just truly believe that there are enough people from too many different reasons, from too many different places, who just can't tolerate the man. And so I think what he ended up doing, whether he meant it this way or not, actually may have saved the party. Because there was clearly a contingency there that saw Bill Weld as the answer for libertarianism.
Yep.
And we know better now. We had, and the problem is that behavior goes back, manifold. I mean, you go back president after president after president. Gary, great guy, average candidate. Should have been prepared for things. On the other hand, how do you compete? How can you be everywhere and everything? And the astonishing about the 2016 is not the handful of miscues that Gary made, but the willingness of the media to look beyond just astonishing statements from either Hillary, or the Trump. Which brings us back to the central question: how do we, as a movement, a philosophy, and with a functioning political arm, how do we overcome this incredible combination of lethargy and at the same time willful ignorance, despite the fact that we represent millions of people?
Well, I guess one of the things that I'd want to talk about, and let me preface this really quick. I attended CPAC the last couple of years, and I did go this year as well, and I had the chance to talk to Brad Parscale, who's Donald Trump's re-election. He's the campaign manager, big digital guy, very interesting, very young. But he was talking about the numbers. I'm a big data guy, so we're talking about this, and he goes, I have 13 million people on my volunteer list. I have the numbers targeted, so I know that every volunteer only needs to convince 11 people to vote with them, and we win this election. It's impossible for us to not win this election. And you look at the Democratic Party and you see a very similar machine that just rolls on day after day, 365 days a year, that puts out, I mean, they have the largest data operation, the most comprehensive grassroots organization in history. The technology that came out of the Obama campaign, it founded 36 different data companies just from staffers who then are distributing this throughout the country for local candidates. And meanwhile, the Libertarian Party is not operating at the same scale.
Right.
And I think one of the big things is what we need to do is, as libertarians, is be comfortable and open about talking about our shortcomings. And I think that's a big step. A lot of times when I talk to folks, I think I mentioned it before, this article, Can Americans Elect a Libertarian? And I spoke about some of those shortcomings. And I got a lot of letters, a lot of hate mail, just saying, hey, I don't like the fact that we're talking about this. And I think that my response to them is the message that needs to be the same moving forward, which is if we don't address our shortcomings, the people with the skill sets out of the millions of us who care about liberty and want to see it succeed out there somewhere, when we say, hey, man, we don't have a system that's allowing us to recognize which reporters we need to be talking to in each given market or each state. Someone out there is going to say, man, I worked on a project in the private industry that could solve that problem. If we aren't talking about the problems as they exist and having these open conversations, that person out there is never going to know that that problem exists because they didn't hear it. And we're still going to be sitting here 20 years from now having the same conversation. Real, candid awareness of our shortcomings is going to be the only way that we're going to get better.
No, and to that, there is a great hope now with Dan Fishman as a true data guy, elected
Absolutely.
as executive director, that we will start to overcome that. And I'm not here to cast shade, if you will, at his predecessors, but Dan is the first person that I've met. Wonderful people work at the national office, but he operates at a different level.
Yep.
There is a professionalism and an industry experience that he's got. Now, of course, then the next question is, are we able to marshal the resources that he needs to do that? And, that's all of us we have to look in the mirror and somehow figure out a way to make that work at some level. Dan's the kind of guy, he's very resourceful. He's going to make do with whatever he's given, and he's going to do a better job than probably just about anybody else alive at doing it. But at the same time, you're right, in an effort to bring it to scale, and the digital divide that's occurring politically between the top two parties and what's happening at our level, we're talking about a national CRM program right now, and which is a great effort. People put a lot of work into it at a time when, again, I'm familiar with a couple of the people who run those democratic organizations. The kind of conversations we're having now were had by Barack Obama in the days after he was elected senator in the state of Illinois. That was a long time ago.
It was.
It
was. And I don't think it's a money problem or a money question so much as it is a willingness to implement. I know that there are amazing things. I live in Pennsylvania. I'm in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And the things that I see happening at our state party are fantastic. We have leadership that's willing to take the steps to, they're integrating with that, national CRM program. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if you look at Ted Cruz in 2016, their technology allowed you on an app to walk up to a door. And when you got to that door, the app had a script for you because it had already analyzed the data file. And it knew not just who this person was, what their likelihood to turn out was, what issues they cared about, but it would then tell you how to talk to them about the things that they cared about. And it allowed, Cruz to get an upset, at least leading up to the nomination. And it was the technology that the left had been using years before. So there has to be some money, but I think there's more of a will, and the beautiful part about us being, top up, or rather a bottom up instead of a top down structure, is we can run these projects. And as soon as we find something that works across these millions of people trying all these different things, is there needs to be a better willingness to communicate with state leaders and then national leaders to say, hey, yes, this works. Let's roll it out across other areas to really help these races, starting at the bottom, city council, commissioners, all of these local races. Those are the ones that we can pick off and win because it's all about human connections. And if we can get better at that, that's everything.
No, absolutely. Are you willing to make predictions for what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, or is it just too far out?
When it comes to politics, that is one thing I feel like I can at least roll the dice on. My prediction is that he will stick with the independent tag for the time being. I do think that there are a couple key factors that could happen that would push him toward the L. One is that someone gets in his ear who is a libertarian and convinces him with real numbers and real data that he could make a push, and that some barometer, whether it's signatures, ballot access, would be markedly improved for him, whether it's the House, in the Senate, or the president in one of those races, that someone can convince him here is an actual path to get there. And I will be the first one to stand up and welcome him and be there. But in the meantime, as a congressman, I really am excited to hopefully see him stick with that independent tag and just use it as, again, an opportunity to build alliances and move the ball forward on advancing liberty instead of advancing party talking points.
Right, and I guess, and this is something I don't have the answer to, I believe Michigan allows you to run simultaneously for the presidency and for Congress. I believe, because I was reading an analysis of candidates who are, you know, let's just say the lower levels of the Democratic gang of 30 are pretty bad. I firmly believe that Bill de Blasio's chances in advancing as a candidate lie more in the desire, the intense desire of people who live in New York City to get them the hell out of town. All right. Yep. Please, Bill. We have a saying here. You know, Gina Raimondo is our. She's the governor of Rhode Island, and she's also now the chair of the National Governors Association, Democratic Governors Association. And we desperately are hoping to see her run for national office as soon as effing possible. Please, as the old Irish saying, "Don't let the door be hitting you in the ass."
Exactly. My fiance is from Staten Island. We're getting married at the end of this month, and through being with her over the last couple years, just interacting with people from New York, Republicans, Democrats.
God.
I hear you. I mean, that is a narrative, regardless of their politics. There is something just human about wanting to move some of these people out of the state and elsewhere. That's very relatable.
No, he is.
No one else wants them, but you know, as long as they're out of New York, that voting bloc will be very happy.
And I worked in New York City for many years, and people don't realize that Rudy Giuliani actually lost the first time out, and then the condition of the New York City became so de Blasio-like that he ran again and was elected overwhelmingly. Staten Island wound up being one of the big swing factors, because people ultimately, when it comes to mayoralties and governorships, want to crave competence. And so when you look at the idiot factor, you've got de Blasio, and then you've got a guy like Hickenlooper, who is just, you know, he's, when it comes to his business attitudes, he's right on a lot of things. Unfortunately, he's a damn communist. But I mean, right. But you know, how does someone like Hickenlooper end up in the same cesspool, the same title pool as de Blasio? And that's the Democratic Party. You know, half of this stuff is people running for, you know, prestige and name recognition. You know, Hickenlooper is widely touted as perhaps running for the Senate. But anyway, you know, so can Amash run simultaneously? There is, you know, are there sore loser laws in place in Michigan? This is where his lawyers, election lawyers, are probably working around the clock to try and figure out exactly, for two reasons. Number one, to make a plan. Number two, to get ready for the lawsuits. Because
absolutely,
you know, the thing that we've come to recognize is that if you're a political organization, you'd better have plenty of lawyers, because when you're the third party, they're gunning for us. They will.
Well, I made a note. I'm sure you saw me writing, but now you've given me something to Google and look into for another article after this. So
okay.
That's a very interesting question. I had not thought about that.
Yeah, and that's the thing here. So election laws in this country are so Byzantine, and yet and how, you know, how ironic. Two things that, you know, to point out that, you know, I just feel like I have to bring up. You know, number one, we couldn't possibly have Gary Johnson in debates, because that would diffuse the message and not give people enough time to discuss. Really? Honestly? And then, of course, there's, again, that notion that, you know, you've got these legislatures, state legislatures, are willing to do backflips to pervert and twist laws to make them work for their guys and against us. And until we get people into state legislators, I don't know how we possibly combat this constantly moving target. And again, I go back to Ohio. For everybody who thinks John Kasich is just a great guy because he was anti-Trump, John Kasich is an asshole. All right, for lack of a better term, and he's out there on social media all the time, and every libertarian, not just Ohioans who are, folks like Chrissy and folks like that are wonderful libertarians. It's a great state party. Should just be backing them up and just calling this guy out every single time, because he is so typical of the new generation of politicians. Even though he's an older guy, he's like Mike Pence. You know that Mike Pence, John Kasich, they're gentlemen. Well, actually, no, they're not. One's an outright lunatic homophobe, and the other one clearly believes the election laws are just some sort of zoning ordinance that he can screw with anytime he wants. They're not nice people. They're not good people. And we have to, which brings me to the next question. All right, I'm an older guy, right? So when I get up there and say people need to get off their keyboards, inevitably I get the dinosaur memes, and I get the, yeah, you don't know the value of Facebook. Well, actually, I have a social media following across a bunch of groups, well into high five figures. I do a streaming television show. Not that I'm a local guy, but I think I know a little bit about the digital world, and I used to build networks. All right, I recognize, to me, social media is an incredibly useful, activist-based communications tool that allows us to reach people that we never would have been able to reach 10 years ago. The problem is how do we get people off the damn keyboards and actually going door to door, old school, knocking on doors? How do I convince people of your generation that, given the algorithms underlying Facebook, those 3 or 4 Bernie-crats from 10 states away aren't ever going to convert to you? They're not going to join the LP. So but at the same time, that guy down the street who's running a struggling business because he's dealing with some jackass at town hall whose everyday life is made miserable. We got a guy here in Rhode Island, 104-year-old soda company. They made boutiques, one of our sponsors, they make boutique sodas before we even knew we needed boutique sodas, all right? All cane sugar. Guess what? 7 years in a row, our state legislature has tried to pass a law that would put an extra tax. Sound familiar? You know where I'm going with this in Pennsylvania, right? A soda tax.
Yep.
All right? And these people are willing to lie. And I bring this up because of I sat and I testified before the Senate committee that was sponsoring the legislation this year that they never bothered to tell him about. He found out through a couple of friends. That's how it happens every year. God forbid they should give the guy a heads up that they're, all right? When I listened to a state senator talk about the 47% decrease, my numbers aren't exact here, in sugary soda consumption in Philadelphia as a result of this tax, the great part about being a libertarian is you usually get to testify last. I mentioned to them that they ignored the 53% increase in soda consumption in the immediate suburbs outlying Philadelphia. Simply, people got in their cars and drove 2 miles down the road, all right, off of, what is it, Kennedy Boulevard, all right? Kennedy Boulevard,
exactly.
Right by the airport, all right? You drive 2 miles over from Kennedy Boulevard, and you're in, not Philadelphia, and you're paying $2 less for a 6-pack of Coke, 12-pack of Coke.
Yep, absolutely.
So when all of those business people are out there, entrepreneurs, they're American, they're newly arrived, they're everything that as we want in our party. They have a passion for business, a passion for wealth creation, a passion for liberty. That's why many of them gave up everything to come here. And they're getting tortured by out-of-control government who panders to them and at the same time picks their pocket. How do I convince people your age, and I'm not trying to single you guys out, to get the hell off the goddamn computer and go out and knock on that guy's door and buy a beer or buy something he's selling and have a conversation with him? How do we do that?
Well, I think I certainly have a few opinions here, and I think what a lot of people generally, conservatives and libertarians, more than anyone else, tend to get into is data. When we connect with people, whether it's online or in person, we start by saying, well, if we increase X by 4%, that'll decrease Y by 7%. We'll get Z result. And you'll never see someone on the left do that. When Barack Obama gets on stage, he's talking about little Susie who had access to a social program. And because of that program, she was able to grow up and now her family is better. Like, humans relate through stories. And there is a serious training gap between what the left is doing and what libertarians and conservatives are doing to talk about the issues. And that's one of the reasons why we've seen this blue wave. But what we need to realize and remember is that data means nothing if it's not actionable. Always have the data, make sure that you're right. I'm not saying go out and make up stories just for the heck of it, but make sure that they're relatable in a very real way. So I was up at PorkFest just a couple weeks ago,
Right.
And I was teaching a class up there actually about building communities. And it was a workshop. So we sat down and we actually went through every single person in the audience and said, what projects are you working on? How can we help you be successful? And at the end of the day, that's one of the things that I think is going to make the biggest difference with this generation is creating events and creating workshops and creating opportunities to learn that involve interacting with real people, right? Like we are tied to these screens in a lot of ways, but nobody likes the keyboard warrior. The only person worse than the keyboard warrior is the guy that shows up to the local LP meeting, complains the entire time, and then leaves and doesn't do anything until he comes back the next month to complain again. Like those are the two worst categories. So when we provide this training, when we provide this real, tangible human connection, that has a compounding effect. And we need to be taking care of our young people. I want to recognize, I guess they're a nonpartisan group, but the Stand Together movement, so Grassroots Leadership Academy, is currently doing grassroots trainings across the country, which I've attended and I think very, very highly of. Also, groups like the Mike Heise and the Mises Caucus, as a libertarian group in a lot of ways, they're bringing people together with real human connections. I mean, that's what's going to help liberty win. Right? Yeah, human action, exactly. And it's training, and it's, we package it differently. So it doesn't say like, come to a boring training, because that sounds like we're just going to be looking at a PowerPoint screen, because the real benefit there isn't just the information, it's the relationships that we build. And, just a shameless self plug, this isn't something that I generate revenue from, and it's not actually even a business, but I keep a digital group of just documents from all of these trainings and events that I go to that say, hey, here's a packet from Young Americans for Liberty or Operation Win at the Door of how to run a campaign. Here's the Grassroots Leadership Academy training booklets for grassroots activism. I do run a group, and I'd encourage people to email me if they're interested in getting access to that portal, just to say, hey, here's a bunch of resources. Take a look at them, share them with your communities, print them out, bring them to people, have conversations. I know I took a little while to get there, but at the end of the day, that's what's going to be the difference maker for getting people off their keyboards and into the real world and making a difference in their communities. We got to be local and we got to be human.
No, absolutely, because the next step, and here's the biggest irony of all, I actually was part of a panel in New Orleans, and it was about social media. What do we do? And a bunch of people brought really good stuff to the table. But I was the last, and I asked everybody, who's been to a town meeting, a town hall? Who's testified at a financial town meeting? Who's testified before your state house or your state senator? And a bunch of people answered. I said, okay, and what did you do with that experience? All right.
Yep.
You make the human connection, and then you use digital technology to spread the human connection as it's been videotaped, portrayed, recorded, however, to other people. So you extrapolate and exponentiate, if you will, I'm making up words here as we go along, but exponentiate, I feel like a preacher, that lesson to other people, and they see that, and they see ordinary libertarians getting up in front of their, in front of their state house and testifying, and they realize, damn it, I could do that too. I'm passionate about this issue. And
you're 100% right.
And then the finest, I'm sure you've seen this as well. The 2A community in the state is very strong, despite being brutally under attack. The finest speakers that I've seen on 2A nights at the state senate, state house, are people who are not in the political bubble.
Yep.
They believe through their core in the right to bear arms, and they come to these meetings as ordinary citizens, and they testify and they preach. They don't even know they're testifying and preaching, but they are. And they become passionate, they become alive. And that's the most powerful of all. It's not when guys like you and I get up and do the normal stump speech we do, or the normal thing we do. It's when we take that human connection, and I think that's what's Michael has done a great job of, when you take that human connection that you make, because I felt that human connection when I was in New Orleans. All right, and then you again project that. It just attracts people. It reaches out and grabs people, and then again, you rinse, cycle, repeat. That's really what it comes down to, and that's I think we're onto something here, because the combination of the training and the opportunity, the judgment-free opportunity for people to be passionate about an issue or a circumstance is what's missing when you live in the confines of the 1 o'clock morning bitch sessions with people on fill in the blanks. You're arguing with people you'll never see again. Larry Sharp, I'm sure you've seen it because you're very active, and I nothing but the warmest respect for your activism. Larry Sharp always makes that great speech that everyone's seen. You don't have to win the argument. You have to plant the seed.
Yep.
Walk away with everyone's dignity, pride, and good humor intact, but you planted a seed. And a percentage of those seeds will come back and refresh the conversation. And then you will create friends and acquaintances and people that you work with, as opposed to yell at. And
you're 100% right.
we need more of that. And this is the time where we have to, I don't know, as a movement, I think we have to take real stock of ourselves in this moment, because Gary made it easy. People challenged Gary for the nomination. They worked hard.
Mm-hmm.
All credit to them. But we, as the members of the organization, we got a lot of our responsibility got abdicated because, quite frankly, there was the presumed nominee, and the nominee had his own fundraising apparatus, and the nominee had his own, people, much in many cases to our regret. but we didn't have to, as an organization or a movement, take a lot of responsibility. Kristen Rasher was out there using funds to get people to show up, and a lot of people did a lot. I'm not diminishing the people who did signatures, but a lot of that was done by professionals. We don't have that luxury this time. We simply don't. Right now, there doesn't seem to be any magic fountain of money or magic instant recognition candidate. And I personally support Kim Ruff. I don't see anything changing anytime soon to dramatically alter it. I happen to believe, as you do, you've convinced me, that Mr. Amash is going to do something. Whatever he does will be as an independent. There's just simply isn't enough. There isn't simply enough time for him to make the statement he made this weekend and move to another party in time for 2020.
It's the beautiful thing about it, and one thing I will say just in response to that real quick, is that it is a long game. We're playing a long game, and I know that sometimes that we can put it out there and say, well, we need to make sure this happens before it's too late. And I've been guilty of that myself. I've put that in writing in a lot of places, but I do think that we are wise to plan for the future and really invest in people and care genuinely about our communities, where when we do the right things to put people in these local offices, it's only going to grow, because then at that point you're demonstrating success. People are going to be more likely to vote for higher office libertarians and liberty-leaning candidates if they know that their county commissioner, if their mayor, if governor, even, all these different state-based or local-based levels are libertarian or liberty-leaning at the very least. It's going to make everyone's life a heck of a lot easier.
No, you're absolutely right. And the time has come now. We don't have a lot of time. But to your point, and it's a critical one, I don't know if there's enough recognition that this is a long game.
Yep.
I don't know. I would prefer, I don't know if you spent much time with Kara Schultz from Minnesota.
To a certain extent, but not much at all. We had a great conversation after the Can Americans Elect a Libertarian article, learning about some of the stuff that they're doing nationally, but very limited.
Talk to her about her experience. A lot of folks forget that she's an elected city council person at a not insignificant town in Minnesota. She has been successful as a candidate, and she has been successful as a council person. That's the type of long game success that will prevent 2024 and probably even more realistically 2028 from having this open question as to where we go. That's the real issue. It is a long game, and thinking that instant results are going to somehow pop up in the months running up to 2020, I think is a waste of time. It's time better spent out in the field. Time better spent going to that businessman, doing as you suggest, creating human events, creating interaction, and creating a community for our ideas. The community's waiting for it. There's such a clear absence of ideas out there. People are hungry for that. They're absolutely hungry for that. And it's up to us. It's just simply up to us. We're only got about 45 seconds left. Tell us how people can find you on the web.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you. I'm a huge fan, and I'm hoping that we get the chance to work together again in the future. If you want to read my writing and connect with me, please send me emails. I can be found at ConnorDrigotas.com. That's ConnerDrigotas.com. And through there, you can find all my social channels, my blogs, my writing, connor.d.drigotas@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to folks about how we can help advance liberty in the months and years to come.
Excellent. Connor Drigotas joining us. We just met this afternoon virtually on the phone. First time we've ever even set eyes on each other. We've already established sympathy, empathy, and a huge issue in terms of our respective colleges. But I think we can overcome this. I have that feeling. Listen, this won't be the last time we speak. Please just, as I tell folks, just send me stuff you're doing. We're a little tiny outpost here in the boonies of. And listen, as challenging as Pennsylvania can be. All right. Remember, Philadelphia, folks. If you don't know it, Google Wilson Good. Philadelphia is still the only city ever to use its own police force to bomb itself. Just go with me on that. All right. As crazy as Philly politics are, and someday when we meet, I'll tell you the story how I went to the Tower Theater in 1979 and spent the night in the Philadelphia subway system dodging Rizzo's Raiders, the MOVE campaign, as well as that's another story. But here's the point. We both live and work and fight for liberty in very challenged environments, and it's the mutual support that come about as efforts like this which make it so rewarding. So God bless. Congratulations on your work, everything you do for the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania, for the national movement, and just keep it up and just keep us posted on what you're doing. All right, bud?
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, we're going to sign off for tonight. We are the Coalition, loud and proud as always. We are outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center deep in the heart of the city we so love, Providence, Rhode Island, the Naked City, the city of about 365,000 stories. We told a few today, some troubling, some uplifting, some quite